Try to relax, forego the stress. Something ain't popping and you look a mess. Here's a suggestion, I hope it works for you. You better chill.
Ooh, you are listening to WPPM LP Philadelphia 106.5 with area local jazz diva Khadijah Renee, yours truly. This is the first of our weekly presentations of a series called Women in Jazz. Now, what do you think of when you hear the word jazz? Do you envision a group of men playing together quite melodically and then veering off into solos on their own, and then coming back down and catapulting into the melodic syncopation of a tune? Either in trio, quartet, quintet, or big jazz band format? Yeah, that's normally the picture that we paint when we think of that word. And even the men involved in the genre are household names like Sinatra, Coltrane, Ellington, Basie, to name a few. But when we think of women in jazz, we normally see a female at a microphone singing in front of an all-male band. Yep, that's normally the picture we see when we think of the word jazz. However, in this show, we're going to purport the elephants in the room. Yes, the women in jazz who also were present with those men alongside, and maybe some of them precoursed these men. So we're talking about women like Melba Liston, Vi Reed, Hazel Scott, Sherrie Maricle, to name a few. As a matter of fact, our guest for this evening is Sherrie Maricle. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Sherrie Maricle. Hi, Sherrie.
Hi, happy and swinging evening to you and to everybody else.
All righty.
Great pleasure to be with you.
Welcome to WPPM LP Philadelphia. So
Thank
glad
you.
you could join us.
Me too.
You know what? Before I start with our interview, I wanted to just read a few brief lines from your bio so that people can know something about who you are.
Okay.
All right. Sharon Lee. Sherrie. Am I saying your last name right, Maricle?
Yeah, perfect.
All right. Is an American jazz drummer. Maricle's musical education began in 4th grade. Maricle began playing professionally, performing locally with a singing jazz bass player named Slam Stewart. While studying music at SUNY Binghamton?
SUNY
Binghamton.
Yeah.
She then moved to New York City and attended New York University, where she completed her Master's in the Arts of Jazz Performance in 1986. So that tells you a little bit of something about how old she is, right? We won't talk about that. And she has a doctorate of philosophy in jazz performance / composition that she earned in 2000. And in the late 80s, she was appointed director of percussion at the studies at New York University. That's a little bit about you, Sherrie.
So without further ado, let's hear a selection from Sherrie Maricle and the Diva Jazz Orchestra entitled I'm Going Fishing. Welcome back to our interview with jazz drum and band leader Sherrie Maricle as we continue our conversation about the voice of women in jazz.
Yeah. There's been a lot of stuff since then. I'm I haven't been teaching at New York University since 2004.
Wow.
But I was there for 15 years and I loved it. That was part of my experience getting my higher ed degrees, and it ended up being a teaching fellowship. So I stayed there, and being in the hub of Greenwich Village in New York City, I certainly got to experience a lot of the great jazz that was happening and is still happening in that area. So that was I loved that moment of my life.
I'm sure you did. You were in the mix of it.
Yeah.
Greenwich Village, that was a happening spot for jazz.
Yeah, I lived about maybe 3 blocks from the Blue Note on West 3rd Street, and it was like a hop and a skip to the Village Vanguard. And there's a great club called Lush Life and Sweet Basil, and just now the area's got great clubs too, like Smalls and Fat Cat and Mesro. Still the Vanguard and the Blue Note, but not to be outdone, Philadelphia has its own incredible jazz spots, and I'm a recent transplant from New York. Not recent, maybe in the last 5 years. Transplant from New York City to Philly, and Philly's a swinging town, that's for sure.
Yes, we have a vibrant jazz scene here in Philadelphia. So tell me how you got started as a musician.
I was attracted to music when I was a kid, and like you mentioned, 4th grade, I wanted to play the trumpet. I was immediately told girls didn't play the trumpet. It was back in the 70s. And I cut to the chase. I mean, nothing deterred me from my musical ambition, and through a series of events, in 6th grade, the band director needed someone to play the drums, percussion back in the concert band, and I volunteered. And once I got back there, and as I like to say, I started hitting things. I never left. In all the recent conversations, there's always been conversations about women in jazz. Except the women that are in jazz never think about the woman part. We just think about the jazz part. But I think, and this has been, since I've been a musician, and but since the Me Too movement, a lot of women have become very, very empowered and vocal about expressing the way that the current field is, and what we can do to make it better and have more equality.
Speaking of equality, boy, these women truly demonstrate that they take no backseat to any man. So let's hear another composition from the collection of the Diva Jazz Orchestra. This time, a Chopin tune reimagined for jazz called Nocturne.
1, 2, 2, 3, 4.
to also join those voices to say that, hey, women are more than just female vocalists. We are musicians, we are arrangers, composers, and band leaders, and we just
producers and engineers and all that. Yeah,
that's exactly right.
like you.
Thank you.
Doing it all. Yeah. And my gosh, today, like, just one of the, you mentioned the movie The Girls in the Band, which is an extraordinary history of women instrumentalists in the music, but that movie ended with Esperanza Spalding, I mean, more or less concluded with her winning the Grammy Award, beating out Justin Bieber for Best New Artist. Amazing, and currently a Grammy Award winner, amazing drummer, producer, educator. Terry Lynn Carrington has been doing some extraordinary things in music.
Awesome.
I mean, so you could, there's hundreds and hundreds of women that currently right now are doing amazing things all across the country and the world in jazz, as artists and all the other fields you mentioned, supporting fields. Yeah.
Well, then who influenced Sherrie Maricle in the jazz genre?
When I was a kid, you mentioned Slam Stewart. He lived in the town I grew up. He lived in Binghamton, New York, and I grew up in a small town called Endicott, New York. That was right a neighbor, and he was very famous in the town. I mean, famous everywhere. But he with some of the other local great teachers took me under their wings and kind of nurtured me and gave me all these opportunities to play and learn how to swing. So he was definitely a big one, Slam Stewart. Yep. And then when I got to New York, my teachers, a very famous drummer named Mel Lewis, Adam Nussbaum, and a great drummer, and then a drummer I met when I was at the Port Townsend Jazz Workshop with Bud Shank, a drummer named Jeff Hamilton, who famously played with the Ray Brown Trio for a number of years, and four of my biggest musical influences. And I feel ripped off in a way when you look back at music history, jazz history especially, all history, the people who write the history, it's very skewed perspective. There's not always equal voices telling the story, as we know from anything to do with race or gender or anything else. So women were largely left out of all the jazz history books, except mentioned in a very marginal way. So I was, after I got my doctorate, much later in my artistic and musical development, did I learn about all these incredible women. And this film, The Girls in the Band, really shined a huge spotlight on incredible trumpet player, vocalist Clora Bryant, like you mentioned, Vi Red, all the women from the Sweethearts of Rhythm, people that I never heard of and aren't even mentioned in the mainstream history books, and it seems like outrageous that they were not, because their contributions are extraordinary.
That's right. I remember reading about the Sweethearts of Jazz, and these were a group of women who performed jazz. I'm talking about all the rudimentary, fundamental pieces of it. The arranging, the composing, the band leading, and traveling around the United States during World War II, when most of the men were off to war.
Yeah, there's a whole history of, this book I'm going to mention, it's called Swing Shift, and it was by a great author named Sherry Tucker, and her book is about all women big bands, and a lot of it, just exactly as you said. There were so many of them. Across regional bands and then bands that toured, like the Sweethearts, who also went on USO tours and did, and it's very like glossed over, like, oh yeah, there were some women bands, but they were amazing. Luckily the Sweethearts have some recordings available, but man, they were swinging like mad.
Really hep.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue into the fact that Sherrie Maricle has her own big band called the Jazz Diva Orchestra. Can you tell us about your orchestra, your jazz orchestra?
I sure can, and thank you for asking about it. So the Diva Jazz Orchestra was formed actually in the summer of 1992. A great drummer, impresario, and manager of the Buddy Rich Band, a drummer named Stanley Kay, had met me on a totally separate occasion. I was playing with an orchestra in New Haven, Connecticut, and Stanley came in as the conductor for the great dancer Maurice Hines. And he called me, that was in 1990. In 1992, he called me and said, hey, do you know women who play as well as you? And I was very complimented. This is Buddy Rich's manager, telling me I play well. And having never really been interested in all-women projects before, I'm going to put parentheses because the ones I knew about weren't artistically on the same wavelength as I was, I immediately was drawn to Stanley because of the Buddy Rich connection. Buddy Rich is the reason I play the drums. I saw him play when I was 11.
Oh my God, he's fantastic.
And I ran home and said to my mom, I have to play the drums. I have to play in a big band. And she's like, did someone give you a pill at school? What's wrong with you? But anyway, so Stanley, we formed this band. 40 women came to the original audition, which we had in New York City, for actually from a lot of different countries. And we formed the band, and our first gig was March of '93. And we've been swinging around the world for the last 28 years.
Wait a minute, you said 40 women turned up?
Yeah.
You had to choose from 40 women?
Yeah, we had to choose 15 from the original 40. And still to this day, and if anybody out there is an aspiring jazz player, please, divajazz.com. Well, I'm interested. I'm in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women have passed through the band in the last 28 years, and some men too. We'll accept men if we can't find a woman. But, anybody, please, stay in touch with that. It's all original music and or original arrangements. We've been very, very blessed to back up some of the greatest singers and entertainers in the world, from Joe Williams, the great Joe Williams, to Carmen Bradford, Diane Shore, a great singer named Ann Hampton Calloway, Marlena Shaw, who's one of my all-time favorites, and the great, great diva Nancy Wilson. So
you guys back Nancy?
And we recorded with Marlena, with Carmen, with Nancy. Yeah, we're really, I said I feel like, from when I heard Buddy when I was 11, and then serendipitously meeting his manager many years later, and just that I feel like I was born to swing. And I'm still the band, but my band too is really in that great tradition of the big bands of, you mentioned before, Count Basie and just Woody Herman and all the great bands that swing in the tradition. And when people. Because jazz today is a lot of things. It can be sound modern, and sometimes I hear jazz myself, and I even say, is that jazz? Like I have a question mark. I don't know what it is. Because to me, jazz, you're going to be tapping and snapping on 2 and 4.
Right.
You got to feel it.
Yes.
Not think about it too much.
That's right.
Feel it.
It comes from here. Exactly.
Yeah.
Who are some of the women in your band right now?
Well, there's always when we perform. There's always, in the big band there's 15, but I have a quintet and also a trio. So the big band, a lot of women have been with me about over 20 years, actually. Our two lead trumpet players, Liesl Whitaker, who is the first, she's in the United States Jazz Ambassadors, the Army band. She's the first woman to have a principal chair in a military band in U.S. military history. And she's one of the greatest all-time lead trumpet players, period. Wow. Extraordinary woman. And the other lead player we have is a woman named Tanya Darby. And she is, oh my God, fat, swinging sound like crazy. She's currently the head of brass studies at the Berklee School of Music.
Whoa.
Educator. No, I mean, an amazing, and she's played with the Vanguard Band and like every band in the universe. She's incredible. One of our trombonist, Jen Krupa, is currently in the United States Navy Commodores. Wow. Also, the military bands those bands in DC, those premier band, they're great.
Very serious about their jazz.
They're great. It's the only job in this country where you can play jazz for a living, the conventional term for a living, and get a pension and get health care. And, it sounds weird, but it's one of the few things I'm really excited my tax dollars go for that, for swinging. So she's in there. Sarah Giacovino, other trombonist, is currently playing the Tina Turner show on Broadway. Our second alto player is also in the Jazz Ambassadors. And my gosh, 13 out of the 15 women in the band are amazing composers and arrangers, and it's just it's an extraordinary band of women. Wow. It really, really is. There's lots of talent on the stage, and we've been together a long time. I think I mentioned all original music and/or original arrangements. We've commissioned all of our music. So for any of you composers and writers out there, divajazz.com, let me know what you got, and maybe we can commission you to do something for us.
Well, Sherrie, why don't you introduce the first song you want our Philly Cam listeners to hear from your most recent CD? Is that the Diva and the Boys? Yeah,
oh yeah, Diva and the Boys. We did that live at the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild. It's a great performing arts space and school in Pittsburgh. Their jazz label is called MCG Jazz, and for their 30th anniversary, we played a live concert, and the producer, Marty Ashby, invited a few special guests from the great Claudio Roditi and Ken Poplawski, Jay Ashby, and Marty's a great guitarist, and he played as well. And let's see, there's so many. I love every track, and that CD, by the way, I can brag just a little bit, was #1 on the Jazz Week playlist for 3 weeks in a row. That was pretty awesome. We never had that.
Awesome.
That happened before for that many weeks.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So, you know what? How about, since I was talking about swing so much, why don't we take a listen to Piccolo Blues? And it features, it's one of Claudio Roditi's compositions, and it's one of those like backbeat, can't go wrong with the blues kind of shuffle. So how about that? Piccolo Blues.
All right, listeners, let's give a listen to Piccolo Blues featuring Claudio Roditi and the Jazz Diva Orchestra. So Sherrie, tell me, what has been some of your most memorable performances in your career? I mean, that you'll never forget. You're like, this is why I do this.
Well, every time you do something new, it kind of feels like that. Any new venue, regardless of the size. But naturally, like the first time we went to Europe was in the early 90s was amazing. We got a call to go play at the Pori Jazz Festival.
Where was that at?
In Finland, in Pori, Finland.
Oh, I heard of Finland.
Yeah, that was amazing. And every time we've spent a lot of time in Europe and South America, and even we played in Croatia. We've done some really interesting jazz cruises through the Mediterranean and also in the Caribbean. But big highlights are always Carnegie Hall. Like, who doesn't want to play at Carnegie Hall?
You guys played there?
Yep, a couple of times with the New York Pops Orchestra. And you step on that stage and with all the reverence for every other genius that's been on that stage. I didn't mean I was a genius, but every genius that's been on that stage, and just especially that's like the classic 1938 Benny Goodman recording that kind of like solidified jazz as a virtuosic art form in 1938. So when I was on the stage, I was thinking of, Gene Krupa, of course, played his very famous Sing, Sing, Sing drum solo at Carnegie. Lincoln Center, we played many times, including very recently at their fall gala this year, and the Hollywood Bowl. Hollywood Bowl has a split stage and it spins for the Playboy Jazz Festival. So there's two bands, so they're spinning the stage, and when you spin, and that seats 17,000 people. That was pretty cool. And so cool. Hugh Hefner paid a lot of, he contributed a lot of funds because he loved jazz. So Hugh Hefner, we've done it 3 times. The first time Hugh Hefner was in his box in the front, and I see him, and he's got his bunnies on either side, and I'm like, oh, and the microphone, oh, Mr. Hefner, if you ever want this all-women, big band for your centerfold, and he goes, oh, no. So maybe so I said to the audience, you can see on the Jumbotron, he's like, no thanks, just keep playing those instruments. I was like, yeah.
But his buddies.
Yeah, but man, and then the 25th anniversary of the Kennedy Center was one of those huge deals, and I never get nervous when I play, but that I had, that shot of adrenaline where you're all the butterflies in it, like, because that was like a star-studded craziness, like just one of those great events, and that's on TCM. That was a television show. That was really exciting in the Opera Center at the Kennedy House. Wow. The Opera House at the Kennedy Center. Right. Let me get that right. That was amazing. But there's so many. Thank you for asking.
I'm happy that you have such a rich memory bank of your great achievements as a woman band leader. So, can you just tell me, what was it like for you to carve out your niche as a woman musician, as a drummer, and a band leader? What can you reflect on that for me?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned at the beginning, I never, when I was much younger, I never ever thought about my gender, and I still don't when I'm playing. I mean, that would be insane. Like, nobody thinks about, when you're doing your job, you don't really think about that, I guess. Right. And I don't know, unless maybe you're a stripper, I don't really know. But I just forged ahead because it's what I want to do, and I think anybody in jazz or the arts, or that you have to have a passion for it, because you can't do it otherwise, because there's so many roller coaster moments, financially, emotionally, artistically. There's a lot of things you're going through. So I was kind of just like, I'm doing this because I love it so much.
Right. And
yes, a lot of things came in. Some I noticed, some I did not, but I was able to just ignore it or absorb some of it, the negativity, but like figure out what to do with it. And sometimes it's been very difficult, truthfully, but a 9-piece version of the Diva Jazz Orchestra has been touring with the great Maurice Hines in his show Tappin' Through Life. We did that in many regional theaters around, from LA to New York, and we were here in Philly too for 8 weeks actually. But we were going to Atlanta. I'm going to tell you that this is like, so right now I'm much more I'm going to say a feminist and active about women in jazz issues, because we were heading to Atlanta about 5 years ago. I called a woman at the theater who ran the theater, and I said, I'm coming with my trio with Maurice Hines. I need 6 horn players, 2 trumpets, trombone, and 3 saxophones, alto, tenor, bari. The woman had an outburst. Oh, women don't play those instruments. I was like, wow. All right, that's insane. I felt, when you get mad and you feel like, I had this rage bubble, and I could feel my face turn red and my ears got hot, and I was like, what is wrong with you? What year is this? Women don't play these instruments. Right. And that made me very aggressive much more aggressive than I had ever been before about, what, this is ridiculous. So of course there were women in Atlanta that swung their tails off and sounded amazing, and there are women everywhere that do that.
That's right.
It's just not often on the radar screen. So
That's right.
I just, so now part of my journey is that, and while probably one of the things I don't like to talk about is, women in jazz. It'd be like the same thing about great band leader Maria Schneider, multi-Grammy winner and a composer, like extraordinary, in the Girls in the Band film. Wow. She's always saying, the journalist always says to me, what's it like being a woman in jazz? And she looked at him and said, what's it like being a male journalist? I mean, I don't know, because I always say, hey, for me playing my drum set, playing as a woman in jazz, it's just like if I was a man in jazz, but without a penis. That's the main difference. But it's a complicated, layered question, because then I was recently at a panel discussion for something called the Jazz Congress that Jazz Times and Jazz at Lincoln Center puts on. Mm-hmm. And there was a panel that was put together, not by the panelists, by outside sources, and there were no women of color on the panel. It was for women band leaders. So then that adds another layer of conversation to this. So there is all of these layers that need to be discussed about how to make things equal and better for all of us.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Because there are a lot of African-American female jazz musicians like Camille Thurman out there now. And
amazing.
Ann Hampton Carrington. So.
And Terry
Lynn Carrington.
Well, Adina Owens, Tia Fuller, who used to play with Beyonce, and Tanya Darby, the woman I mentioned. Yes, of course. There's many. There's there's so many layers to any conversation about equality or making it better. We have to address all of these things, and it's definitely more than more than one conversation.
Get this message out to our audience is important, because we have young girls who are coming up, and if they want to decide that they want to play an instrument, they should be encouraged to do so. It has nothing to do with your gender. Has nothing to do with your color. It happens to be about your talent and your desire to do something. And so that's why this message is very important to get out, because we want to inspire young girls everywhere that they have magic, that they have power. And Sherrie Maricle is definitely a prime example of that. So
I want to tell you, yes, and if definitely, and if in your heart you want to do it, 100% do it. There's nothing I like it. There's nothing that you can't do. So just a funny thing we were talking about earlier, when my trio, it's called a 3D Jazz Trio, is the trio that tours with Maurice Hines, myself, a great pianist named Jackie Warren, and a bass player named Amy Shook. We were playing, Nancy Wilson asked us to come play her 80th birthday party in Los Angeles. So, my other two bandmates kind of look like me, very like almost suburban, like soccer mom vibe. And we're on the stage getting ready to play for Nancy, and the MC guy, he was a comedian. He turns around. He goes, "Oh, I didn't know soccer moms could play jazz. That's not what jazz looks like," kind of thing. Sort of like what you said at the beginning of our conversation. That's not what it looks like. But once we started playing, he's like, "Oh, man, damn, all right."
Right.
So, don't judge a book by its cover. Right. You never know what's in there.
Well, Sherrie is a multifaceted artist. She has roots here in Philadelphia. You weren't born and raised here.
No. Moved here about 5 years ago.
And she established her own venue here, where you can come and hear jazz live. Can you tell us more about Drummers?
Yeah, well, I bought this place on East Norris Street in Fishtown, and it was a building. The top floor was an industrial loft. It was a former stationery factory. Loved it. I said, I need a drum practice room, and the first floor was so big, and I didn't need a space to live in, so I was like, let my just brain run wild, and it's my living room. It's my house, but it's I turned it into something that looks like a performance venue. So it is open to friends and colleagues to come and present their music there. There's a monthly jam session that's run by a Philly woman in jazz named Haley Brunell, great singer and trombonist.
Yeah, she's good.
That's usually the second Monday of every month. But yeah, it's Drummers. It's on Facebook. Drummers at Jazz Space Philly. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Or if you're interested in the space, just contact me on Facebook.
Here's another tune by the Diva Jazz Orchestra entitled Forever in My Heart.
2152 East Norris Street. It's
All right.
cool. There's always swing happening in there.
Yeah. Well, Philly's got a lot going on, and Drummers is definitely one of the places you should check out if you like jazz. So I'd like to thank those who tuned in to Women in Jazz series at WPPM LP Philadelphia. This broadcast will be heard over 106.5, the radio station, as well as being broadcasted on our Comcast and Verizon stations. So look for us. And Sherrie, I want to thank you again for taking time to come all the way down from New York and join us here in Philadelphia to tell us about the Diva Jazz Orchestra and other stuff you're doing.
Well, it's my pleasure, and nice to talk to everybody, and great to talk to you, and congratulations on this series.
Thank you.
We'll keep things swinging here.
All right. Well, you've been listening to Women in Jazz series with the local jazz diva myself, Khadijah Renee. You can find me on Facebook, Khadijah, Khadijah, Renee, Renee. On Facebook, you can visit me on my website, www.khadijahrenee.com. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter. So look me up and catch my next show. In the interim period, look for this show to come on once a month, every month. And we'll see you again next month in February. Hopefully our show will be forecasting or talking about the great Melba Liston, the trombonist, one of the famous jazz trombonists who made her mark in the jazz genre. And you'll learn all about Miss Melba at our next presentation. God bless and take care. Hope to see you again.
Life can be brutal and you might get pissed. Here's the solution.